All right, welcome to the show. Others receiving votes. I'm Pat Forde, joined as usual by Bryan Fischer, and we have Kevin Sweeney in again, also our Sports Illustrated colleague. We've got a combo platter football basketball show for you. There's always news happening in college football, and there's enough happening in college basketball. And after this show, I'm going to Italy for the Olympics. So these guys are driving the bus. We'll see. Hopefully they keep it on the road. But today, we are going to weigh in on some notable college football additions, coaches, players, a lot of movement going on out there. We will check the recently released Big Ten 2026 schedules, who got a good schedule, who got a tough one. We will recall the college days of some Super Bowl players, since the Super Bowl is happening this week, Seahawks and Patriots. We will assess the Bediako experiment 3 games in and the next dumb thing in the NCAA eligibility pipeline fiasco. It could potentially get even dumber than it already has. We'll discuss the NBA draft pecking order for the stellar group of freshmen after a big showdown over the weekend. And we have to weigh in on involuntary public toupee removal. All right, gentlemen, let's get going. First of all, some movement, some big names in new places in college football. Start with a new defensive coordinator at USC, Gary Patterson, former TCU head coach. Good enough head coach at TCU to have a statue of him down there, but they determined his time was up a few years ago, and the switch actually worked well. Sonny Dykes took the Frogs to the college football playoff, but Patterson clearly wasn't done coaching, and he's had a number of stints in various places as analyst, advisor. Now he's going to take on a full-time defensive coordinator gig at USC, which lost D'Anton Lynn, their DC, to Penn State, and have been through a few coordinators under Lincoln Riley. Bryan Fischer, tell me, is this a big deal or not?
Well, I think it's a pretty big deal when you consider that Gary Patterson is a recently named College Football Hall of Famer. So I think in that respect, getting him back in the game is pretty notable, and pretty notable for USC and Lincoln Riley, and what kind of pretends to be a make or break year for the Trojans and for Lincoln himself. And I'm going to be curious to see. You look at Gary Patterson early in his tenure, about a decade ago, 3 11-win seasons between 2014 and 2017. Seemed like he had things rolling, and then it kind of just dropped off the map. He was 21 and 22 over his last 3 seasons. So I'm going to be curious for Gary Patterson's sake. Has he lost his touch? Because this is a big hire for him. I think in terms of his legacy moving forward in the game. He's interviewed at a few places for another number of head coaching jobs. Seems like he still has that itch to be coached. I think it's huge for him. I think it's huge for USC. I think D'Anton Lynn did some pretty good work there in LA. You remember back when Caleb Williams was running around there. USC was 123rd in the 121st, in the country scoring 34 points per game in 2023. D'Anton Lynn cut that by about 11 points by the time he left in 2025. So big for Gary Patterson to kind of continue that. And Pat, I know you know GP. I know you know Lincoln Riley. The personality mix between those two tech is going to be pretty interesting to me with what they have going on. Who's going to be the coach on either side of the ball? Who's going to be calling the plays? That sort of thing. Pretty interesting things and interesting times there in LA.
Yeah, I'm fascinated by how this is going to unfold. Frankly, two strong personalities, but I think they can be strong personalities together because they have distinct areas of expertise. There's not a lot of overlap. Gary Patterson isn't going to come into the office and say, hey, I think our 3rd and long offense needs a tweak. And Lincoln is unlikely to head down the hallway and say, our blitz packages need some work. I think these guys will trust each other to do their thing. And but I think your point, Bryan, is legitimate about whether or not he's lost his touch. I mean, he's 65 years old. It doesn't mean he can't coach. We've seen a lot of guys. Curt Cignetti did pretty well at age 64 this last year. But he has not had a full-time coaching, like on-field scheme role that we know of. Maybe he was a shadow coordinator, but I doubt it, at Texas and Baylor 2022 and 2024. He was out in 23. He was out in 25. So we'll see. Does he need to be sharpened up here at all? I don't know. USC has been perpetually in need of better defense. It did improve the 2 years under D'Anton Lynn. As you mentioned, they gave up 23 points per game last year, the lowest in the Lincoln Riley era, but probably still not good enough. There were some games they could not get off the field when they needed to. When they were playing Oregon, when they were playing Notre Dame, when they're playing Illinois, those were the 3 regular season losses. So I think intriguing on paper. We'll see about in practice. Kevin, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, the only thing I had was, it feels like their talent level has risen and will continue to rise with their front office structure. And maybe that makes it the best spot for someone like Gary Patterson, who has a reputation as like mega film junkie, just wants to coach ball. Like if you're thinking about where could he get back in the mix, it feels like a situation like this where you have elite offense and elite front office already in play. It seems like a slam dunk.
Yeah, I mean, that they have loaded the roster, it seems like. I mean, they have improved it. A lot of really good freshmen, and it's risky to count too much on freshmen right away, but they did land the number 1 player in the class of 2026 outside linebacker. And, if you can plug in a couple of guys even on that side of the ball immediately and get some results from them, that could have benefits. All right, another one that perhaps has not gotten as much attention, but I think is a definite big deal. Derek Owings, strength coach at Indiana, is going to Tennessee. And USC tried to get him last year. Indiana kept him. And if you watched Indiana this year, that was really the last 2 years, but especially this year, I thought that was a dramatically stronger, tougher team up front on both sides of the ball. And there's a reason why big-time programs were going after Derek Owings. He clearly knows what he's doing and helped make Indiana go from good 11-2 to 16-0. There was several of the same players on the offensive line and the defensive line were just demonstrably better at their jobs. And I think you look at the strength coaching as a big part of that. And, you guys know how coaches are. I mean, they're insane about their strength coaches. They think they're the most important people in the building. They spend a lot of time with the players. They're huge in the off season. January, February, those are strength coach months. And then you on the backside of spring practice as well. So I think that's a really big deal. Tennessee needed it. I think they took a couple steps back defensively this last year. They do need to be a bigger, stronger, tougher team. And I think Derek Owings is a great step in the right direction there. What do you guys think?
I agree completely. And it was funny, Pat, he was on the field at the national title game, and literally the next day he's there at Knoxville, which I think was a pretty interesting thing. Like, at least take a break between jobs, dude. But you're right about the toughness part. And I think for Tennessee and Josh Heupel to kind of say, hey, look, this is a bit of a statement of intent hire. Yes, it's a strength coach, but that is your biggest touch point with players nowadays, like you're saying. And so I think that does mean a lot for them, not only to get tougher, but to kind of have a new voice in there after the setback they had this past season. So big for Tennessee to poach somebody from the national title winner, somebody who has that inner workings of the operation down, that can maybe it's not just Josh Heupel. Maybe it's your new defensive staff. Maybe it's some of your offensive guys that were a little bit cozy there. That to me is the big thing with a new voice in the room and a new voice for a lot of those players as well. I think it's going to pay off dividends down the road for Tennessee, and was a really big, I think, thing, because we know Curt Cignetti wanted to keep somebody like him back in the fold in Bloomington.
Yeah, it strikes me that everybody wants a piece of the Cignetti culture, magic, fairy dust, whatever it is, right? So no matter how expensive, it seems like a really good test. And I think on the Indiana side, like, it's the first real shakeup of this staff nucleus that has been incredible. I'm not going to say that, okay, that there goes Indiana. Oh, the strength coach is gone. But, that it is a big deal, I think, for their program as well. I think the culture is set, but when you start draining your talent, that's how dynasties don't build, I guess, is the best way I would say.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. Is that I am stunned that Bryant Haynes, especially the defensive coordinator, but also Mike Shanahan, are still there for year 3. I thought one of them would get a head coaching job. Maybe they had offers and just decided, I want a really good one. But to keep those two, I think is a huge coup going into year 3. But yes, this is the first key piece of the Cignetti coaching staff that left, and now you got to see, okay, what does that mean? How does that manifest itself? And is it a big loss or not? We'll find out. Kevin, got to ask you this one. This happened a couple of weeks ago, but we didn't have a chance to get to it in the middle of covering the playoff. My man, the great Harley rider, easy rider, Bobby Petrino to North Carolina as offensive coordinator. Bill Belichick, did he welcome the fox into the hen house, or did he welcome in a really good play caller? Big deal or not? Kevin, what do you think?
I don't think it's a big deal because I look at the quarterbacks they brought in this winter. I don't think Billy Edwards is the guy. I don't think he's been the guy at Maryland. I don't think he was the guy at Wisconsin. I'm not sure why, the third time is going to be the charm there. So while I am a believer in Bobby the play caller, ignoring all the other stuff that you get when you hire Bobby Petrino into your building, I just don't know that that's the type of swing I'd make at quarterback if I'm trying to navigate a winnable ACC.
It's interesting, Pat. We always talk about what kind of books would you like to write, and I think doing embeds are always a bit of a pain in the ass. But doing an embed at North Carolina this year with a Bill Belichick from the Hall of Fame and Bobby Petrino in the same staff meeting, that's gold. That's writing gold. So kudos to the North Carolina beat, at least on this hire. I think it is a floor raiser, at least. You look at Taylon Green, super raw prospect at Arkansas last year. I think, he impressed, I think, with what he was able to do. It was an offensive heavy Razorbacks there when Bobby took over. The deep, very good. They were able to put up some points. They pushed A&M to the limit midseason, nearly won that game. So Bobby can still call some plays. He can still dial things up, and maybe, with some more reined in responsibilities in terms of not having to worry about the defense or special teams, or now the roster too, which could be a bit of an issue as well at North Carolina there. I think it's going to be an interesting hire just on the field. If we kind of remove everything in the coaching staff meetings and the clash of personalities, I think it could raise the floor a little bit there in North Carolina. And just having somebody to go to for Bill Belichick to say, here's how things are. Like he didn't have that voice in the room. A lot of NFL guys. Yes, there are some, certainly his son worked at Washington last year, but somebody who has been in the college game for a long time, I think that could serve the program well. And we all know that should the school decide to make a move, we all know who everybody's favorite intern could end up being.
That's the thing. Please no, not another Bobby Petrino interim stint. I've had enough of those in my life. And the question there, I think, Bryan, is can Bill Belichick bring himself to go down and say, hey, this is this weird college deal here. Bobby, what do you think? I have a hard time seeing Bill in that role, but maybe this last season showed him what he doesn't know and perhaps humbled him in some manner. I don't know. I kind of doubt it. There's no doubt. Look, Petrino's quarterbacks still perform well, and the offense still moves and scores and racks up yardage. There's no doubt about that. So he can make the North Carolina offense was terrible last year. Now, to Kevin's point, how much does he have to work with? Are you turning hamburger helper into better hamburger helper as opposed to a steak? We'll find out, but it's fascinating. It's an interesting combination again of personalities there. And while Belichick maybe in theory can say, Bobby's going to handle the offense, he is not the kind of guy that just is not going to stick his head in on pretty much everything. I think that's who he is, and that's how he rolls. So we'll see how that works out. I am less convinced that's going to work than the other two we have talked about. Now, a couple players. Starting with quarterback Darian Mensah to Miami, as Miami continues to lead the nation in lawsuit players. We had Darian Mensah, who settled the lawsuit with Duke. We got Xavier Lucas, who has an ongoing lawsuit with Wisconsin. And Bryan, help me out. The defensive end from Missouri who's being sued by Georgia.
Oh, absolutely. Which I just wrote about.
Damon Wilson. There we go. So yeah, we got a lot of lawsuits hanging around Miami, but at least the Mensah one is settled. He's free to go there, and steps into the Carson Beck role, the Cam Ward role. The last 2 years, they've had plug and play guys that have worked out quite well at quarterback. Is this one a big deal or not, Bryan?
Well, I think it's obviously a big deal because it's Miami and there's the lawsuits attached to everything. So that just adds another layer to this transfer. But I think if we're just kind of removing kind of how he got there, and I'll be honest, it was hilarious to see as maybe 2-3 hours after the lawsuit was technically settled between the parties, Darian Mensah just happened to show up on Miami's campus for his visit and just couple of team site media members there taking photos of him. I mean, that really kind of sums up where we're at in college sports nowadays. But look, Darian Mensah, a pretty good quarterback. I mean, he was 7th nationally last year in passing yards per game. Number 2, he's replacing Carson Beck, who was number 2 in completion percentage. And I think that is something that when you look at that offensive staff and the way that they develop their quarterbacks, that can really help him. I think, at times he was a little bit reckless last year, 6 interceptions, 34 touchdowns. The highs were there, but there were a couple lows. And so if they can coach that out of him, I think it's a big pickup. And this kind of seems to be Miami's MO in terms of, we talk about roster building all the time. All right. It seems like their roster building plan is it's not to get those 5-star guys out of high school and bring them up through the program. It's all right. We're going to go out. It might be a mercenary thing every other year, but it seems like we're going to go out. We're going to grab the best quarterback that we can, whatever our money can buy, and it seems like that's been working so far. I mean, they had the number 1 pick in Cam Ward, had the top offense in the country. Obviously, Carson Beck took him to the national title game, so high expectations there in Coral Gables for Darian Mensah. But I do think you talk with coaches as the player, he is capable of kind of getting to another level. It's going to be interesting to see how he can do that with the Hurricane.
What do you think, Kevin?
When you talk about arm talent, I mean, Darian Mensah has all of it. There were some very high highs, as Bryan said, at Duke. And, I really liked watching their offense. And I also really liked Barkate, the top wide receiver at Duke, who seems to be headed to Miami as well. Like, that's a loaded skill position room with him and Tony. Fletcher was really phenomenal in the playoff run, took things to another level there. Like, I think their offense looks maybe substantially more dangerous than it did, at times this year. Like they look very dynamic to me on paper.
Yeah, I think it's a potentially huge pickup. He's got to perform. You mentioned 6 interceptions. He also had 8 fumbles. He fumbled the ball a lot last year. So that the 14 turnovers, that kind of stands out as something he's got to clean up. And in the games that they lost, a lot of times you were looking and saying, too many Mensah mistakes. The Illinois game early, the UConn debacle. But he is talented. You watch him throw the ball and you say that's an NFL passing talent, I think. So, again, to Kevin's point, you plug him in with Malachi Toney, you plug him in with Mark Fletcher to run the ball. Offensive line, they've got some monsters to replace there. But if they do that, I think the Miami offense is at least as good as last year, if not better. So I like that pickup for the Hurricanes. Another big deal pickup, Jordan Seaton, left tackle to LSU. He was at Colorado, was the highest rated high school recruit that Coach Prime had in his time there, has had. Highest rated he's had since Travis Hunter joined him at Jackson State. And he was good. Freshman year, they threw him in as a true freshman. He had some struggles. Last year, definitely improved, and he looks like a kind of guy who will be an NFL left tackle. Maybe a little bit like Will Campbell, who was at LSU and is now starting as a rookie for the New England Patriots. I think that's a very big deal. I would imagine Sam Leavitt, the quarterback they've brought in from Arizona State, thinks that's a very big deal. And they're going to Lane Kiffin's going to put together a good offense. I don't think there's any doubt about that, but that's a key part there because the line now we'll see they got a run block and we'll see how Seaton does in that area. I think he's a little bit more naturally gifted as a passing blocker, but he can improve. But I like that pickup for LSU. You guys' thoughts?
I think it's massive. I think that, early in the portal kind of window, and you're talking about Lane Kiffin's tenure, and yes, landing a quarterback was certainly paramount for the Tigers, and, revamping that roster, 40 new incomers when you add Seton in there, but you needed a building block, along that offensive line. And that was their biggest issue, last year. I thought, their offense just collapsed. Number one, as soon as Garrett Nussmeier got hurt, certainly, but just the constant, issues up front, guys running free when they shouldn't have been, the pass ball issue. For LSU to really compete in the SEC like they want to, you've got to have an offensive line. They had one a couple of years ago when they were developing talent, did not have it. Brian Kelly was speaking a pretty high game. All right, this might be units that he's ever had. All right, well, it turned out to be nowhere near that. And so I think because they're going to replace basically all 5 starters, when you look at some of their other portal additions, they're bringing in guys to completely revamp that unit. But you need a guy that you can rely on. I think when you look at Seton, he's got that prototypical size. I think with what he's been able to put on tape, he could be a first-round talent, one of the rare first-round talents that you could say is going to come out of LSU this year and maybe challenge for one of those top 10 positions in a very quarterback-rich draft next year. I think it's a huge pickup for LSU and really another statement of intent, for Lane Kiffin to say, look, this is what I'm all about. Yes, there were a lot of promises about how much I'm going to be able to spend on my roster. All right, well, this is a good reason why LSU is ponying out the big bucks to land Lane Kiffin and bring him in.
Yeah, Pat pointed it out that Sam Leavitt has to love this. That's the angle I take. You got to protect your big asset at quarterback. He's obviously super talented. He took a lot of hits last year, was banged up, was never really healthy. Now, part of that is I think Sam Leavitt is a bit of a riverboat gambler himself, and is not going to be sliding every first down, right? He wants to lower his helmet and hit, but you got to protect him more than LSU has protected its quarterbacks the last couple of years, and Jordan Seton certainly helps you do that.
Yeah, I did love too the element they're bringing him in 2 weeks after school started and after final enrollment deadlines and everything. It's we'll work it out. And I think somebody threw out the magic word alignment, and we go back to Kevin Sweeney's now famous phrase, at least in my mind, of alignment means the coach gets whatever he wants from the AD and the president. There we have it. So
from the governor, I'm sure.
Yeah, right. You can take that one all the way to the top, and he'll just rearrange the entire academic calendar, I would imagine, as needed. So beautiful thing, the alignment there. All right. Hey, the Big Ten announced their schedules for the season for 2026. We'll hit the other ones too. We will take a look. It's going to be a long off season, people. So we will take a look at the SEC schedules, ACC, Big 12, all that business. But the Big Ten's is freshest, just came out within the last few days. Kevin, just let's do it this way. Let's do, first of all, a team that had a good draw, got a schedule that is favorable for them to have a good season. We'll each do one of those, and then we'll do who had a tough draw.
Yeah, Wisconsin, after this gauntlet that they've been on the last couple of years, avoid Ohio State, avoid Oregon, avoid Indiana, avoid Michigan. Obviously, you have the non-conference game against Notre Dame in week 1 at Lambeau. Have to go to Penn State week 4. You probably have to steal one of those two to be a serious playoff conversation team. And if not, I'm sure the pressure on Luke Fickell heats up again. But this is the type of schedule you've been dying for if you're Luke Fickell with what they've stared down. It seems like they feel like they have their guy at quarterback in Colton Joseph from Old Dominion. A lot of excitement there. I think reason for optimism if you're a Badger fan trying to climb out of the depths of despair here.
Yeah, and I mean, after a couple of years of just absolutely the worst possible draw that you could get in terms of Big Ten play, I mean, I think that's almost kind of impacted just in terms of our opinion of Luke Fickell so much because every game it seemed like they were a decided underdog down the stretch, playing the Ohio States and Michigans of the world, and to miss a lot of those, I mean that's huge for that program in terms of rebuilding confidence more than anything. I think that's huge for them. I'd also throw out Maryland. They do got to play at Nebraska and at Ohio State back to back in the middle of October, but look, they're at USC and at Penn State at the end of the year. But outside of those two, pretty manageable. You miss Indiana, you miss Michigan, you miss Oregon. And I think those are kind of some of those other teams that you're going to talk about. If you play Ohio State, if you play Indiana, certainly if you play Michigan or USC, Oregon is in the mix as well as a semifinalist from the past year. If you're playing any of those teams or 3 or the 4 or something like that, that's a big thing on your schedule. And, for Maryland, I think all things considered, pretty manageable for them, especially another year that they said, all right, we're going to keep the band back together. We're going to bring a lot of those freshmen that played a lot last year back. Maybe this is where you can kind of show that growth. And for Mike Locksley, certainly show the administration that you deserve to be back in the job come 2027.
Yeah, so both, I mean, it is absolutely now or never scheduling for Maryland and for Wisconsin, for Fickell and for Locksley. A lot of people were surprised they still have their jobs, and now you've got the chance you either show something this year or you're out, and perhaps out by the middle of the year if things are going particularly poorly. So they've got the schedule. And for Wisconsin, yes, this is a little bit of a counterbalance after having just a brutal run of it. Gives Fickell a chance there. I like Washington's schedule. It ends really hard, but through the first 10 games, and especially after keeping DeMond Williams the quarterback, they've got, I think, a chance for a great start to the year. They open with 4 in a row at home: Washington State, Utah State, Eastern Washington, Minnesota. Your first road game is USC. Certainly not going to be easy, but it's not a time zone issue. You're home against Iowa. Then your next road game's at Purdue, certainly winnable. Week off, and then at Nebraska, could be winnable. You're home against Penn State. You're at Michigan State, winnable. It's not out of the question they're sitting there 10-0. I don't think they will be, but those are all games that you can look and say, we could win. Now you close home against Indiana, at Oregon, which could be the top 2 teams in the league, although you probably factor in Ohio State there as well. But I think if you are Jed Fish, you're saying, give it to me, man. We'll see. We'll take our chances. We'll see how many wins we can stack up and see how good we are, how much confidence we've built up heading into those last 2 games. So, all right, who got a bad schedule? Who do you think really is up against it from a schedule standpoint? Kevin?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a proud Northwestern Wildcat, and I'm staring down quite the gauntlet at Indiana, at Oregon, at Ohio State. That is not a fun trio for David Braun and Chip Kelly. They also have a week 2 bye and then play 11 straight weeks. That was not the Big Ten being out to get them. I believe it was because their stadium may or may not be finished, working to get that done. But if not, gives them maybe a little bit of a pass to hopefully get, play an FCS game on their home camp, on their home lakefront stadium, and then open the Grand Palace of New Ryan Field in a couple weeks against Colorado. But yeah, they will certainly be tested. You basically schedule in 3 losses for yourself. Never say never, but staring down how do you win the other 9 is tricky. And they've been aspirational in a respect. David Braun has spoken about it. I think their AD Mark Jackson has expectations of more than like, oh, we snuck into a bowl game this year. Let's pat each other on the backs and say we're Northwestern. Like, I think there is this feeling of like, why not Northwestern? This schedule, I think, suggests why not Northwestern, at least in 2020.
Well, and at Minnesota late in November too, which is that can be a tricky one, not just in terms of the weather, but we know how PJ Fleck likes to get his Gophers fired up for a lot of those games, especially with the old Big Ten West. So, yeah, you're right. I mean, Northwestern was top of mind. Ohio State, of course. I mean that schedule, when you factor in the Texas game in the non-conference, pretty brutal. Iowa or at Iowa. Maryland, at Indiana, at USC, on Halloween, no less, home versus Oregon. They also got Nebraska and Michigan, of course. So Ohio State is playing. If they get through this gauntlet, not only undefeated, but even just one loss, I think they will definitely be well-deserved in terms of a college football playoff bid like they expect there in Columbus. I kind of single out Nebraska, though, in a pretty make-or-break year, really for everybody there, from Matt Rhule. Got to play Indiana at Oregon back-to-back in October, and their closing stretch of no bye, Washington at Illinois, yes, at Rutgers, but also Ohio State down, and then at Iowa. And that has been a tricky series, and especially those close, beat up by Ohio State possibly at home, which has been the norm. They're for the series against Ohio State, and then having to go to Iowa, and I think that's going to be a pretty improved team as well under Kirk Ferentz. That's a tough hand to be dealt for Matt Rhule when you kind of thought, all right, they were going to make a big advancement last year. Now you kind of take a step back, get to 7 wins. Could be a tough sledding there in Lincoln.
I agree. Nebraska was going to be the one that I was going to bring up because that they've got most of the heavies on there that they've got to deal with. So does Michigan. I will say that they've got the usual spa treatment September where every game is at home, but they're not all easy games this year. They've got Oklahoma at home September 12th. They've got Iowa to open Big Ten play on the 26th, but then they've also got the top 3 teams in the league, at least on paper, going in. You've got Indiana. They're in the Big House, October 24th. But you go at Oregon, November 14th. And then, of course, you close at the Horseshoe, November 28th. And you guys did mention, I think Ohio State should be ranked number 1, but the schedule might be the one thing that makes me say, there just might be a couple losses on there for them. So we'll see how it all shakes out. Obviously, a lot of time to further analyze, overreact, decide who the conference office is out to get. That's always a fun off-season job for the various fan bases to decide who the conference office is stacking the deck for or against. But all right, let's talk about the Super Bowl coming up. In case you didn't know, there's one more football game to be played. Santa Clara, Seattle versus New England. And always at this time of year, kind of like to go back and look at the guys we covered in college and see how they are doing, what we remember about them, if we thought they would be at this position at this point. And I'm going to start with a guy. I'm not saying I thought that he would be an NFL. I thought he would be a very good NFL back. He's been even better than I thought. Kenneth Walker III at Seattle, who – frankly, like Mel Tucker owes him everything. Like all of the money whatever he got to keep from Michigan State, he should just give to Kenneth Walker, because that dude like made his career for the one good year that Mel Tucker had in 2023. It was 2021 when they went 11-2, and Kenneth Walker ran for 1,600 yards, had 8 touchdowns. Had another touchdown receiving. I mean, he was a beast. And Mel Tucker's career with Kenneth Walker and without him were 2 completely different things. So I hope if at any point Kenneth Walker ever, comes through town wherever Mel Tucker is, he's keeping a very low profile for some reason. If he ever comes through and like needs a ride to the airport or needs somebody to help him fix a spare tire or something, Mel Tucker better answer the phone and say, yes, sir, anything you need, sir. But I'm happy to see Kenneth Walker. I interviewed him. He's a really, really nice young man, renowned hard worker, just an absolute workout warrior and a beast. So happy to see him in this position. You guys got any thoughts there on Super Bowl guys we covered in college?
Yeah, I was at the first Kenneth Walker game for Michigan State when he ran for 75 on the first play from scrimmage against Northwestern, and it was sort of like, who is this guy? And off to the races he went, and he is no longer an unknown commodity. Certainly, I also certainly remember watching the Jackson Smith-Njigba Rose Bowl, and I think there were maybe some questions when he entered the league, like, is this guy a number 1 wide receiver? Maybe it's just sort of Ohio State star wide receiver fatigue, but he has been as good, if not better, than Seattle could have asked for, and a huge reason that their offense has made the strides. Obviously, Darnold, but he's been absolutely phenomenal after trading DK Metcalf in the offseason.
Yeah, I was at the Rose Bowl. It was one of the rare Rose Bowls after the semifinals, and it was still plays on New Year's Day. It was supposed to be the last traditional Pac-12 at the time Rose Bowl matchup, and you're thinking, all right, we'll see how and it was just a wild game, and JSN certainly went off. I mean, 347 yards and 3 touchdowns, and carried them at times. I mean, that was maybe one of the greatest all-time performances as a wide receiver, at least I saw in person. I mean, Utah were throwing everything at him, like crazy defenses. They were down a couple of cornerbacks. I remember that, and he was feasting on a pretty good Utes defense that season. But he had his way. Certainly, Southern California kid. Played pretty well in the game. And the other Rose Bowl obviously was the Sam Darnold Penn State one, which was back and forth. Saquon Barkley was there. That was a crazy one. Sam threw for 5 touchdowns and 453 yards. And if you remember, like USC kind of jumped out to a big lead, and then Penn State came roaring back. They led 42-27 in the third quarter. And then, I mean, the crazy comeback. I remember, just the euphoria around Sam. And he was a great kid, certainly in terms of just, dealing with him. That certainly came through. And he was just, I think, so happy. And you remember at the beginning of that season, which, it's funny to think about. The first game was the opener against Alabama, and Sam Darnold didn't start. It was Max Brown versus Blake Barnett, which I'm sure rings a bell out there. They were both getting benched, and if Sam ends up winning that game, the 2 quarterbacks that came off the bench in that game, Darnold and Jalen Hurts, might be the back-to-back Super Bowl champions the last 2 years. So goes to show you never know from those openers what you might end up getting.
Yeah, both those guys you mentioned. Jackson Smith-Njigba, there have been so many good receivers at Ohio State that they just kind of blend together. It's like he was on the same team with Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson. And then his junior year, he barely played. He played like 3 games. And that's when all of a sudden Marvin Harrison blows up and Emeka Egbuka, and now all of a sudden we're on to Jeremiah Smith. And it's like, oh, Jackson Smith-Njigba was about as good as any of them. And so good for him to be showing it here. But also Darnold, I've got a soft spot for Sam Darnold, who's been given up on by multiple NFL franchises. He was very good at USC, and he was a very likable guy, just that very SoCal chill and, friendly, and just didn't seem to even almost understand how big a deal it was to be the USC quarterback at times. And he's figured it out, and now he's a big deal as an NFL quarterback. So happy for him and to see him in this position. Drake May, who we didn't mention, but you wonder if Drake May had not decommitted from Alabama and they went with Jalen Milroe, who was a good quarterback, but Drake May might have been the guy that kept Alabama's dynasty on track a little bit longer there, because he's clearly showed what an exceptional quarterback he is. I mean, we could see it in college for sure, but he's proving it very quickly at the NFL level. So
yeah, I mean, the big break was, when the coordinator change happened there at North Carolina under Mac Brown, when they went from Phil Longo, who he had that phenomenal first season as a starter under Phil Longo, and then he goes to Wisconsin, and Chip Lindsey comes in, and it wasn't quite the first season, in terms of the numbers, and certainly from, he had to carry that Tar Heels team, at times, and you can still see the talent though, and I think that's the Patriots are on in terms of that upside. I think the bigger question for me, Pat, 12:30 a.m. kickoff there in the middle of the night in Italy. Will you come up for the game and at least wake up or stay up for the first half?
Absolutely. There's no doubt I am watching that game. I am not going to not watch the Super Bowl. I will be physically ill in one respect because the Broncos aren't in it, but I will be watching whatever the time is, and no matter what my duties at the ski slope may be the next day. So I will be on board. A little bit of news just broke here while we're taping, by the way. Gus Malzahn is retiring, Florida State offensive coordinator. So Gus Bus, 35 years in the business, stepping down. Hope he enjoys retirement. Had put in some great work, but something has to be fixed there at Florida State, and that starts with the offense. So happy trails to Gus Malzahn. All right, let's hit a couple hoop topics here. Kevin, please tell us here, the Charles Bediako experiment is not going great, I don't think, at Alabama. They're 1-2. They lost at home to Alabama, and then they got absolutely run by Florida on Sunday. A very impressive performance by Florida. I think their big men were turbocharged for that meeting. They played great. All 3 of their big men that they can play at once just took turns beating up on Alabama in various ways. Todd Golden backed up his very bold pronouncement. We'll beat them anyway, even with Bediako in the lineup. What do you make of the Bediako situation 3 games in? Was it worth the amount of criticism that Alabama has taken for bringing him in?
Well, I don't know that Nate Oates really cares about criticism or has embarrassment. Like, the guy will do whatever it takes within or without the rules to win basketball games. Like, and it's nice when people make it very clear who they are, right? Like Nate is that guy. But I do think Nate really thought that they were one piece away, that they were a really good team with great guards, that if they could add Charles Bediako or someone like that, because they were exploring mid-year options that did not require a lawsuit to play, that those did not come together, from the G League, from overseas. I think it was after those things didn't go that they shook Bediako back. And I think they really thought that would swing things for them, but their roster has a lot of holes. The lack of size outside of Bediako, their portal class, he's been so good in the portal the last several years. This one is a total bust. They look very average. Maybe Brandon Miller wants to come back. That might swing things a little bit, but if not, I think the Tide are not destined for any glory this year.
Yeah, and is the juice worth the squeeze? And I think Alabama's certainly learning that it was not, in this case. And to be honest, this is everybody jokes, about BYU and having older players, and especially on the football side. And sometimes that just because they're older does not mean that they're always pan out. It's just because you're getting these G League guys. There's a reason why they're in this G League. I think the overall perception of Charles Bediako, maybe it's just from his time there at Alabama, the first, was a key part of that Final Four runs, and he was a key part of those teams. And you think, all right, he's had some growth, right? Well, it's clear that development has stalled out, and I think it's going to be interesting too when the committee gets down and starts discussing Alabama. How are they going to treat these couple of games? Are they going to completely throw away those results? Are they going to is it going to impact the Tide seeding if they get into the tournament? How is the committee going to treat this, especially if, say, in a couple of days when the judge ultimately rules on this, if he ends up missing the rest of the season in terms of getting taken out, or whether he's included in the roster moving forward? I think it's going to be very interesting to see, because as you termed it is an experiment, Pat, and it is not going great there in Tuscaloosa. But the good news is spring football is only a couple of weeks away, and so I think that will be earned quite quickly in that state. Yeah,
that performance was somewhat alarming, I thought, from Alabama, because it looked like they just rolled over and quit at certain points. And I give credit to Florida. Florida played hair on fire. We're the reigning champions. You come in here, we're going to take care of business. And I mentioned the big guys, but also I got to give a shout out to Boogie Fland, who, started off not having a very good season there at all. But in that game, 8 steals and 8 assists. I think he's figuring out what to do. Cannot shoot from the outside. Hadn't made a 3 since January 13th. Doesn't mean he can't help the team and make some really big plays, and he did in that game. So Florida looks like they are coming together nicely now at this point. But if you're Alabama, yeesh, that was a very concerning performance, not just from getting beaten, but looking like you kind of quit at various stages of that. But now, got to ask you this. Charles Bediako might not be the most ridiculous college player. This is going to wait maybe till next year. We'll see if this actually comes to pass. But Amari Bailey, who played at UCLA, at some point in time, I vaguely remember him, went pro early. I think, was he just 1 year, Kevin?
Yeah, he was one and done on a Sweet 16 UCLA team. Was sort of like this elite recruit who decommitted a million times, wound up at UCLA, was always, eyes short set on college and longer term on the NBA. Made a really bad decision.
Yeah. He wants to come back. Has played 10 games in the NBA. So he has taken that next step beyond Bediako, who never actually got to the NBA. Signed NBA contracts, didn't play. Bailey is the next step. He has played in the NBA. But as he told ESPN last week, right now I'd be a senior in college. I'm not trying to be 27 years old playing college athletics. No shade to the guys that do. That's their journey. But I want to go play. I went to go play professionally and learned a lot, went through a lot. So, why not me? Well, I'll tell you why not you, because the rules don't allow it. And again, the thing that gets me is I got bad advice. That's a you problem. If that's actually true, usually it's not true. Well, it may actually be true. You may have gotten bad advice, but that's because you wouldn't listen to the good advice. Because there's plenty of people out there that you can talk to, and they do talk to, that will give you feedback. The NBA itself will give you feedback. Your school, your coach will give you feedback. You can find all kinds of feedback, but if you only want to listen to the guy you've known since high school who said, "You're the bomb," go, man. They don't know what they're talking about. When they see you, they'll figure out how good you really are. Then that's how you end up in this situation. I'm sorry. If that's the advice you listen to, then I believe you probably ignored better, more rational advice somewhere along the way. Anyway, Bryan, I'm sorry. I have hijacked this, but I'm fired up. Amari Bailey, BS. What do you think?
Oh, well, and this is the crux of the situation, even with Charles Bediako, and certainly what the NCAA's argument. When you make that decision to declare for the draft, you kind of have crossed that point of no return in terms of the eligibility. And NCAA's one of their chief arguments with Bediako. Obviously, that's going to be a big. Like, I'm just kind of curious, like, what kind of NIL deal has somebody promised him or something like that makes it worth it for him? Like, go play in Italy, man, or go over to, the Euro League or something like that. Like, or keep trolling in the G League. Like, that is a more viable path. If you really want to be back in the NBA, if you really want to go be a pro like that, signing those 10-day contracts, getting in front of GMs that way, like, is way better than jumping onto some random college team at this point. And it was a bad, going back to the original decision that he made. I know a number of people at UCLA were kind of upset at just the way how focused he was in terms of jumping to the draft before he was ready. He definitely showed some flashes, during his time there at Westwood. He had some pretty explosive games. You could kind of see the scoring touch there, but nowhere near the well-rounded and really consistent player that you would have expected out of a top recruit like that. He definitely needed some more seasoning. And man, in this day and age, I think kind of guys like Bailey kind of reconfirm the case that if you're not kind of that guaranteed top 15 type of guy, NBA or NFL at this point, go back to school, because you can make way more money and you can get that extra development. And so I think it's, these test cases that we're seeing right now, whether it be Bediako, whether it be Bailey, I think they're going to go by the wayside pretty quickly, not just because the courts are ruling on it, because I think the kids are getting smarter. They are getting better advice, and they are understanding the name of the game is actually to stay in school as long as possibly you can, because let's face it, there's not much of a compensation difference at the high end of college football or college basketball compared to some of those first round contracts at the end of the first round.
Yeah, I mean, look, assuming someone takes the dive, Amari Bailey will be $1 million player in college basketball next year. Like, I'm not guaranteeing that someone will. I think number one, I think there's now a sensitivity, to not being the guy who's blowing up the enterprise the way that, Nate Oates is perceived right now. But look, there's 70 high major coaches. You're not telling me one of them with maybe lacking job security says, yeah, like he's better than the guy we can get in the portal, and he's more proven. So yeah, I mean, look, assuming he's able to build some sort of a market for himself, which I imagine he will get paid a lot of money. He will get paid more than he would make if he was on a two-way in the NBA, which is the best case scenario for someone like him, who has been kind of bouncing around, as you said, between the G League and potentially going to Europe. I just had to laugh at his lawyer, Elliot Abrams, who is, by all accounts, like one of the best of the college sports lawsuit chasers. His quote: "You've got a college-age kid who wants to go to college, and you've got a system that says you've gone to a different league, so you're out forever." As far as I'm concerned, I'm pretty sure he can enroll in any college he would like. If education is what Amari Bailey seeks, I promise it's out there for him.
Absolutely. Yes. That's part of the great sham of this. And yes, no disrespect to Counselor Abrams, but he is also the guy who part of the argument for Tez Walker, the receiver from North Carolina, who he got a waiver in a very public battle where Mac Brown lost his mind basically at the NCAA as everybody tried to shame the NCAA into making Tez Walker eligible. But part of the thing with Tez Walker was, well, if he doesn't play this year, he's not going to catch passes from Drake May. Okay. All right. I'm sorry. You may still have to sit out. If you're a good enough wide receiver, the next guy can throw it to you too. He really can. And as it turned out, Tez Walker, it didn't really pan out that much for him. So, I mean, he did play for the Ravens, so he's made it in the NFL. But the fact that we were acting at the time like this was just this gross injustice, the ability for lawyers to find a little foothold and attack it. That's what they do. I get it, right? Good for them. But this one, if Amari Bailey shows up in a college uniform next year, I will perhaps expire. But we'll see what happens. Last hoop topic. Kevin, you wrote about it. We had the big showdown Saturday, Allen Fieldhouse. Half of Darren Peterson was better than a whole of AJ DeBonsa. Peterson for Kansas, DeBonsa for BYU. Maybe the top two picks in the draft. Both freshmen, both outstanding, both having great years. Did Peterson lock up the number one pick? Does it matter how much he actually plays? He's missed 10 games. He's played fewer than 30 minutes in 5 others. He sat out the second half with cramps, I believe, of that game. Tell us what happened there in that game, please.
Yeah, what's sad is it was the best Darren Peterson has looked from an explosiveness standpoint. Obviously, the dunk that will be replayed a gazillion times between now and the draft was special. But defensively, he was flying around, got in passing lanes for transition buckets. He just makes the game look incredibly easy in a way that I can't remember another high school guard doing. And you can contrast that with AJ, where things look really difficult for him at times, right? As talented as he is, I think as he refines his handle and learns how to really use all of his elite athletic gifts. I just think at times, you watch AJ and it's like, oh, look, another tough 18-foot pull-up. It's a tougher way to live than the way that Darren does on the court. And so I do think, he has created some space for himself with the field. Now the hamstring issues and the cramping and the quads, whatever is bothering him in his upper leg area does seem significant to me. I know there are sort of grand conspiracies floating on the internet about him load managing, him not wanting to play. It seems like a situation where I would be much more concerned that it's the latter, that he has a real problem, because number one, if his agency and him wanted to load manage this, they would probably tell Bill Self to stop playing him 17 minutes every first half. He comes out, he plays almost the first half every game, and then his legs lock up. That would be the most illogical way of approaching this. And if they didn't want him to play, he could opt out and not play. He would still probably be the number one pick, especially after this. Or at worst, he would be second or third. He wouldn't be costing himself anything substantial by not playing. So the most logical explanation is that there's something actually wrong here. How severe, I don't know. And I don't think we will know until he does his medicals at the combine in May. And that will either calm any NBA nerves that don't seem to be overly prevalent at the moment, but I'm sure will grow, especially as, non-scouts get involved in these decisions, GMs, owners, right? I believe the owner of the Hawks flew in for that game. Right. If you have the number one pick, I think the owner probably is more worried about, that this guy doesn't actually play basketball than the scouts are like, well, yeah, but I watched him in high school and he's unbelievable. Right. Which he is. Right. So look, I'm still optimistic that everything will be fine in the long term. And this is something he just has to work through, whether via diet or stretching or conditioning or, whatever the case. But it strikes me that there being a real medical issue here just makes more sense than oh yeah, we're going to take a dive around the U16 of the second half every game. It just doesn't pass the smell test to me. And I refuse to believe that the people advising him would be that daft.
Well, finally we have an excuse to actually read those Big 12 availability reports, because it does seem the lone thing to be interested in terms of Kansas, because obviously if Kansas does not have him out there, they're losing to the likes of UCF and some others, and it is a bit of a struggle for the team at large. But he is just a special player, and I think he definitely probably earned himself the benefit of the doubt in terms of being that number one pick. We'll obviously see, the results of the lottery are probably going to be overly determining in terms of what the order is of those kind of top 3-4 picks, in terms of all the options available to those teams at the top of the draft this year. And It will be interesting. I think that the injury thing with Peterson in particular, I think it's going to prop up in terms of, is there a team out there? Maybe they're 2 or 3. Maybe they have enough picks to maybe move up to 2 or 3. Maybe you start hearing those rumors from those NBA insiders. The medicals, his hamstring was a little bit bad. Maybe it was, a severe strain. Somebody to do a little bit of jockeying. I think that might be more than anything. Leads to, but he understands what he wants to do with the ball. As soon as he gets it, and he's coming up court. I think with Debanza, I mean, he's still in the system. I think it has not helped him at all. The supporting cast, you will see guys go off, here and there in spurts, but the supporting cast has not been as consistent as I think BYU ultimately would have liked them these last couple of games, especially on the big stage. They have had some big comebacks, but in terms of putting themselves in big holes early on in the games, this just seems like that's probably very concerning for Kevin Young, very concerning for AJ Debanza, but I think he's still, in terms of his upside, you can tell he's just scratching the surface. And I think that performance that we saw between both guys on Saturday, what we've seen out of Cam Boozer, I think every week we're starting to see why everybody talks up this draft class so much. You can see it. It's easy for the common fan to see. It's certainly easy for NBA scouts to see, and certainly the general managers out there. There's a reason why they have all been circling this draft class, and we're seeing it pretty much on a nightly basis in college basketball, and that should make come tournament time even more fun when we see these guys in action.
Yeah, it is a special freshman class, and they just keep showing up. I mean, like Keaton Wagler has just been a revelation. He was unbelievable on Sunday. There's just a lot of really good freshmen that are fun to watch out there. The Peterson dunk, he dunked on the entirety of BYU. I mean, he dunked on generations. He dunked on Jimmer Fredette. He dunked on Danny Ainge. He dunked on like 7 generations of BYU. That was an incredible play. And we will get to see that in the draft run-up. I hope we get to see Darren Peterson play 30 minutes of football or 30 minutes of basketball during the NCAA tournament as well. And yeah, the number one pick, you want some durability there. I can't help but thinking of Zion Williamson, who's never really gotten himself going for a variety of reasons. But that was a guy that was supposed to be, an NBA superstar, and he's not in the lineup very often, which is a key part of being a superstar. All right, guys, let's end with this point after. This was a fantastic moment in sports over the weekend. Boxing match. I don't even know. They were probably in Vegas. I don't know. It was on DAZN. And our man from Sports Illustrated, Chris Mannix, was ringside. And boxer Jarrell Miller, he had a unique wardrobe malfunction. He was fighting Kingsley eBay, and at one point eBay hit him with enough force and at the right trajectory that suddenly Jarrell Miller's hair came off. It was fake hair. It was a hair piece. It was a toupee, and it came loose and started flapping, created a bit of a sensation on the internet, believe it or not. And Miller actually just kind of grabbed it and threw it out of the ring at one point, kind of laughed about it while that was actually happening. And then he laughed afterwards in the interview with Mannix. I liked his approach to this whole debacle. He won a split decision, but lost the hair. Gentlemen, my question for you, existential question, is it better to be knocked out with your hair on or to win without it? Bryan.
Well, that's the thing. Like, I almost think this is a better thing for Kingsley eBay. It'd be like, look, you know how hard I hit? I knocked the hair off of guys. Like that's a bigger thing as opposed to this. And he kind of looked like one of those Franciscan monks a little bit, with the hair. At some point, though, dude, there's a point of demarcation in terms of just going full shave, and I think Mr. Miller has certainly reached that after that fight. And if nothing else, he will at least go down in the annals of boxing in terms of having to done this. But to answer your actual question, I think win without it, because not only do you make the money in terms of the purse, but like the amount of interviews he's going to get, the amount of publicity he's going to get. I'm sure he's going to get some just for men, or some, one of those Rogaine hair removal or whatever type of NIL deals, if you will, for boxing. So he's going to make the money off of it, and I have no doubt about that.
Yeah, I would also say to win without it, it's the NIL era. Like let's cash in. The other thing, this was the underappreciated part of this. He lost his hair in the first place in the days leading up to the fight. Like, this is not a bald guy. He said that I believe he was at his mom's house and he showered, and he used what he thought was shampoo, but was what he claims to be ammonium bleach, which would do much more damage than simply.
Ouch.
Like that I can't imagine it was that, but he obviously used a cleaning product of some kind that did poor numbers for the hairline. I don't know that the rug was necessary, but who knows? I hope he has plenty of brands in his DMs after this.
I'm struggling to believe that excuse. I don't know. Who grabs bleach? Who has bleach in the shower or wherever you're washing your hair and then says, yeah, what is this? I'm just going to put it on my head and assume it's shampoo. Maybe that's the case, but I don't even know how you would make that up. So I guess maybe it's real, but good Lord. I don't know. If you're going to go the toupee route, which is really kind of never a good route to go. But if you're going to, I think I'd rather lose and keep the facade intact, than to have to walk out of the ring with the, as you said, the monk look, and everybody knows now that you had the fake rug on there. I don't know. Anyway, I'm glad he won, and yes, I hope he puts the purse money to good use, and maybe better hair in the future. Good luck to Gerald Miller. And good luck to us as we try to continue this podcast through the off season. I'm out for Italy. Bryan and Kevin got the wheel for a couple of weeks. I'm sure things will go smoothly, probably go better in my absence. We'll find out. But thanks for listening. Please download, subscribe, give us nice reviews, whatever you want to, and we will talk to you all later.